Hello, I'm Elizabeth McLeod-Walls, and I have the privilege of serving as the 15th president of William Jewell College. And William Jewell College has the privilege of being in formal affiliation with American Public Square. About 18 months ago, we formed what I like to call a semicolon relationship with American Public Square, meaning that William Jewell College and American Public Square are distinct entities, but we have formally affiliated because of our shared passion for critical thinking and civil discourse. I could not be more proud that William Jewell promotes events and activities associated with American Public Square at Jewell throughout the region. And I'm especially excited that our students get to intern and participate in events hosted by American Public Square at Jewell, and they get to take classes from our distinguished visiting professor, Ambassador Alan Katz, who of course is the founder of American Public Square. The Kansas City region is so fortunate to have American Public Square at Jewell provide the kind of programming that it does throughout the region. And we are proud to be in that semicolon relationship and to be affiliated with American Public Square. I look forward to all of the events and activities that we're going to be hosting together over the coming years. Congratulations, American Public Square at Jewell. We are so proud to be in affiliation with you.
The mission of American Public Square is important to me because I truly believe in what they're trying to accomplish. When Ambassador Alan Katz brought this concept from Tallahassee, Florida, I thought it was needed then, but since that time, extremism has taken center stage in our nation. And so it is needed now even far more than ever before. One of the memories that stands out for me as a particularly good program was when we had Secretary of State Chris Kobach debating the vice president of La Raza. And Chris Kobach's involvement with immigration reform made it a particularly hot topic between the two of them. They came together and they showed such respect for each other. I don't even think we had to ring the bell. It was civil discourse and there was humor added. It was a packed house and it was a very snowy night. And I just remember being so proud to be part of an organization that could put on a program like that and really come away feeling like I heard both sides and there was good. There was a common good that came out of the discussion.
The mission of American Public Square has never been more important than it is today. Our world is so fractured and our country is more divided than ever before. So we need a place for civil discourse and a place where issues can be debated, we can present both sides, and we can even disagree without rancor. And I think that's so critical in today's society. I love the evenings at the square. Bringing in national figures has always been a highlight for me. Matthew Dowd, Kathleen Parker, David Frum, Deval Patrick. They've all been so interesting, such nice people. And for someone like myself who's so interested in politics on a national level, it's been really a fun aspect of the whole program.
Hi, I'm Kansas City Mayor Quentin Lucas. During this time in our nation's history, we're dealing with a number of different crises. COVID-19, political polarization, racial unrest. And it's important now, more than ever before, that non-like-minded people get together for important conversations about how we plan a path forward, how we address the issues of our past and today, and how we become a better and stronger community. At American Public Square, each day and in each conversation, that's the important work that's done, bringing communities and people together. I'm proud to be a member of American Public Square because I'm proud to help us all find the solutions we need for our future.
Some enchanted evening, you may see a stranger, you may see a stranger across a crowded room, and somehow you know even then, that somewhere you'll see her again and again. Some enchanted evening, someone may be laughing, you may hear her laughing across a crowded room. And night after night, as strange as it seems, the sound of her laughter will sing in your dreams. Who can explain it? Who can tell you why? Fools give you reasons, wise men never try. Some enchanted evening, when you find your true love, when you feel her call you across a crowded room, then fly to her side and make her your own. All through your life you may dream all Once you have found her, never let her go. Once you have found her, never let her go.
I believe in the mission of American Public Square because if we're to prosper as a nation and a people, it's important to spend time listening to and learning from our fellow citizens who come from different walks of life with different perspectives. American Public Square, through its mission and its programming, does exactly that. It helps foster a stronger dialogue and sense of understanding. Solutions are hard to arrive at if Americans are constantly questioning or attacking each other's motives. American Public Square works to challenge people, to develop a sense of understanding, so that we can achieve a sense of common purpose when it comes to our country's political debates. I support American Public Square because its leaders and its supporters live up to that mission every day. Its organization and its leaders are committed to the ideal that open, substantive, and fact-based debates strengthen our citizens and strengthen our democratic institutions. That we together can forge a stronger sense of character when the American people minimize divisiveness and maximize respect for each other's opinions. And lastly, that it's up to each individual to play their part and take action and engage in the public debate and in the democratic process. My favorite memory from American Public Square was when Ambassador Katz basically called me up and said, "Hey, I need you to get out here to Kansas City and explain how the fight over the media and fake news is impacting politics." And I said, "Oh, wow, great, a real easy subject, right?" Well, anyway, off I go to Kansas City, and we had about 600, 700 people out on a weeknight, and we spent easily 2 to 3 hours and could have easily gone 2 or 3 more hours with a discussion that was very balanced. It was a discussion that was informative, but I think most importantly, it was as insightful for the panel members that were part of the discussion as it was for those APS members that were there in attendance. And you know, the other best part was how many people lingered afterwards and to express how, even though they didn't vote for some of the candidates that I worked on, or they didn't necessarily align with me and my politics, or even many of my viewpoints, but just how much they appreciated the opportunity to be heard as members of the audience, and also to hear and learn and listen from some of the other panelists and some of the other folks in attendance. Needless to say, that was a great experience. And I got to tell you, it's one of those experiences that a lot of people in national politics need, and a lot of these creatures from inside the Beltway, it would really help them to witness an event like that.
We have an absence of civility in the country, partly because there's an absence of civility in the leadership, which matters a lot. But this caused a tremendous reaction so that neither side is civil. And the American Public Square is actually about bringing people together who have disagreements and who have different philosophies, and allowing them to see each other as human beings and explore each other's ideas. Yeah, it was fun. It was, Kansas City is a city that's I recommend highly to people who are looking to move to the middle of the country. It is a city with resources way above its population's punching weight. As far as I know, it's the only city its size with actually an opera concert. And so the sort of the civic engagement in Kansas City is extraordinary. What I remember is a large auditorium full of really interested people who really wanted to explore issues and not be clever and say silly things to each other, which is what so often happens in gatherings like that. The other thing I remember, of course, is the unbelievably great steak dinner afterwards.
Good evening. Live from the Real Media Studios in Overland Park, Kansas, welcome to American Public Square at Jewell's annual signature event, Evening at the Square. My name is Claire Bishop, and I'm proud to serve as Executive Director and COO of American Public Square. As many of you know, since March, like many organizations, American Public Square has had to pivot in order to remain operational during a pandemic. We have successfully brought to you dozens of virtual events over the past 6 months or so, including our popular Cocktails and Politics series and Both Sides podcast. Tonight's Evening at the Square is an event unlike any we have produced in the past, during a year that is certainly unlike any we have experienced in the past. Our hope with a virtual Evening at the Square is to provide you with a fun and meaningful evening while staying safe and socially distanced. Thank you for your interest in joining us during these unusual times and for your continued support always. I hope you were all able to listen in to hear from some of our APS supporters and from William Jewell Artist Scholar candidates Haley Schmidt and Turner Staten during our pre-show this evening. One quick housekeeping note. If you would like to download a copy of tonight's digital program booklet, please visit our event webpage at americanpublicsquare.org/event/TLP. Now, allow me to welcome our members to tonight's event. Thank you for your support. We cannot do our work without you. For those of you who are not yet members, I hope you will consider joining us. You can find membership information on the back of your digital program booklet or visit us online at americanpublicsquare.org. I want to acknowledge tonight's platinum level sponsors, Jean and Tom McDonnell and the Macintosh Foundation. Additionally, special thanks to our gold level sponsors, Jennifer and Bud Bacon, Children's Mercy Hospital, Eller Corporation, Real Media KC, and Marnie and John Sherman. You can find a listing of all of our platinum, gold, silver, and bronze level sponsors in tonight's digital program booklet. We are so grateful for our sponsors for helping to make tonight's virtual program a reality. As we kick off tonight's program, we are excited to recognize our first ever Founders Civility Award recipient. So, without further ado, I give you American Public Square founder, CEO, and chairman, Ambassador Alan Katz.
Claire, thank you. I want to echo Claire's remarks in thanking our members and sponsors for making tonight possible. For some time now, I have wanted to recognize the accomplishments of remarkable leaders who've demonstrated a commitment to bringing together our diverse community to engage in civil, fact-based dialogue. The first time I met Adam Hamilton and explained to him what American Public Square was all about, he informed me we were doing the same work. I considered that a great compliment. Truly, there's nobody more deserving or more obvious a choice to receive this inaugural award than Reverend Adam Hamilton. And so with that, it is a great honor to present our first American Public Square Founders Civility Award to Reverend Adam Hamilton of the United Methodist Church of the Resurrection. Adam, you embody the ideals on which our organization was founded, and I am delighted you have joined us here tonight. Thank you for all that you do for our city, our nation, and our world. You serve as a model for all of us. Congratulations.
Ambassador Katz, members and friends of the American Public Square, thank you for this tremendous honor. It means a great deal and reflects the heart of the congregation I serve and the way they seek to live their lives. We surveyed the congregation a couple years ago and found that of our members, 49% are Republicans, 26% are Democrats, 25% are independent, and in any given campaign, we may have both the Republican and Democratic candidate as members of our church. On any major political issue, we have people on both sides. Our basic assumption is that no side of the political divide has all the right answers, and that the Christian faith, and I would say most faiths, calls us to love our neighbor. To love doesn't mean to like. It has nothing to do with agreement. It's a moral decision to act with kindness, compassion, and love. It also requires a humility that says, I've been wrong in the past, I might be wrong here too. And that leads to a willingness to listen to others and to try to see through their eyes. One of the things I love the most about the American Public Square is that you bring people together to have hard conversations, to do so with grace, seeking to help people understand where other folks are coming from, believing that it's in the listening that we learn, that we find the walls coming down and the bridges being built. As a young person, I had pretty traditional views of marriage, one man and one woman. I mean, this is 30 years ago. Those views changed as a result of two things: reading Scripture in the light of its historical context, aware of how culture shapes faith and even our text of the Bible. But that alone would not have changed my views. What changed my views was listening to people share their stories, their hurt, and their love, and my views changed. At Resurrection, we've been working to address racial injustice for 25 years. Among the things we've found is central to this is for people, white folks, to listen to the stories of African Americans. And in listening and seeking to understand, we find empathy and compassion are fostered, and walls begin to fall, and bridges are built. I was rereading an NPR story this morning from 2017 about a man named Daryl Davis. He's an African-American blues musician who's made it his mission for the last 30 years to build relationships with members of the KKK. He spent 30 years pursuing this mission, during which time 200 Klansmen have given up their Klan membership and have presented him with their robes. This kind of change, this heart change, comes from relationships. I'll mention one last thing. As a church, we're committed to helping depolarize our city. This month, we launched a Love Your Neighbor campaign. The 4 weeks leading up to the election, yard signs going up in yards, in the medians of where all the election signs are going up. T-shirts, over 9,000 T-shirts, and our folks have launched on a campaign of kindness. All of this is meant to remind us, this Love Your Neighbor campaign, that to be human is not about being right. It's about loving. It's about caring for and having compassion for your fellow human beings. And so, Ambassador Katz, I brought you one of our Love Your Neighbor T-shirts. You presented me with an award. I wanted to have a chance to present you with one of these T-shirts, and hope you wear it with pride as together we seek to remind our city that we're called as human beings to love our neighbors. We love ourselves. Thank you so much for this honor and this award. And we love American Public Square, and I'm very grateful for you.
I believe in the mission of American Public Square because to really understand the complexity of both the social conditions that shape our health, you have to engage broad perspectives in a myriad of viewpoints. And in a day and time where so much of our news is customized to our liking through our Twitter feed and even through the channels that we watch, American Public Square provides great discourse for variations in thought, and all from a leadership perspective. So greatly appreciate the mission of American Public Square. You know, APS provides a great platform for diverse thought leaders to come together and share varying viewpoints around tough conversations that challenge us intellectually, that challenge us emotionally, and that challenge us civically. So really appreciate the variety of paradigms that are shared through the APS platform.
Well, I think American Public Square helps make democracy work. I mean, the whole idea of democracy is that we the people get to decide what our laws are. We the people get to decide what our regulations are. We the people get to decide who our leaders are going to be. They aren't selected for us by the king or by or some religious leader off in a castle somewhere. We are the ones that get to decide. And we are now the oldest democracy. And as a consequence of a number of factors, American Public Square has become even more important. The country is quite large, 330 million people. It's a large geographical area with lots of differences. And I do think social media has contributed to extreme polarization. I'm not talking about the divisions that occurred in the late 60s and early 70s, where that was actually more violent than what we see today. But I'm talking about polarization, where you tell me you're a Republican and I'll tell you what you're for. You tell me that you're a Democrat and I'll tell you what you're for. And back in the even as recently as the 1990s, when I was serving in politics, it wasn't so easy, because there were Republicans who were for civil rights. There were Republicans who were for the environment, and there were Democrats who were against both those things. So, but today there were Republicans who were for gun control. There were Democrats who were opposed to gun control. But today, I can almost tell you what your position is going to be on half a dozen different issues based upon you telling me what party you're in. And unfortunately, if you're going to try to resolve conflict, which is what American Public Square is attempting to do, for people to listen to one another and attempt to answer the question, where is their common ground? Where can you agree you're going to get 70% of what you want rather than 100% of what you want? Because that's how we make progress. We don't make progress by getting absolutely everything that we want in life. So I think American Public Square has become much more important than it was even when I first attended there. I think, I don't know, 10 years ago, I attended my first one, and I think it's gotten a lot more important since then. American Public Square has become much more important, much more valuable, much more central to what we're trying to do, which is to make the government of, by, and for the people work.
I believe in the mission of American Public Square because I think we have to relearn how to talk to each other rather than just about each other. And we're not going to be able to build bridges to solve problems unless we learn again how to talk to each other. And I think American Public Square is very much about precisely that. I guess I put it this way. I support American Public Square because I think modeling what it takes to engage with people who have different opinions, who don't always come to the same set of facts from the same perspective or reach the same outcome is a critical skill that we have to learn and perfect, frankly, in order for our civic and political lives to survive. We have to learn to be respectful. We have to learn to be patient. We have to learn to be active listeners, and we have to learn to bear a real faith and fealty to the facts. And that has been coming apart in so much of our public discourse, that having a place where those are the ground rules and where people of different perspectives come together and engage on hard topics and show that within those ground rules or guardrails we can do so, is a first critical step to restoring our democracy's ability to solve our public problems.
I believe in the mission of American Public Square because I cover politics in America, and I understand how important it is for people who don't understand each other, don't agree with each other, and often have never considered each other's circumstances or points of view to actually listen. One memory that really stands out to me is I came and spoke on a panel about politics and the American presidency, but I stayed afterwards to talk to people, and they didn't want to talk about reporters or the White House or national politics. What they really wanted to talk about was what was going on in their own communities. And that was just so telling to me. I mean, I think we all spend a lot of time focused on the big headlines, the big national news, but what really motivates people is how they experience the news in their own homes, in their own lives.
Congratulations again to Reverend Hamilton for a very well-deserved honor. Tonight, American Public Square at Jewell is pleased to welcome 4 co-founders of the Lincoln Project, a notable group of political strategists who seek to, in their own words, hold accountable those who would violate their oaths to the Constitution and would put others before Americans. In so doing, members of the Lincoln Project are bucking their Republican roots and the GOP party line to back the Biden-Harris presidential ticket in 2020, and their message has been getting a lot of attention. With bitter polarization and a collective allergy to civil discourse on the rise, tonight we will explore what has motivated these veterans of the political system to shed their partisan identity to pursue a once unthinkable political objective, electing a U.S. president on the other side of the infamous aisle, out of a sense of patriotic duty to their country. Our guests from the Lincoln Project include political strategist Reed Galen, communications strategy consultant Jennifer Horn, public affairs strategist Steve Schmidt, and editor-at-large of the Daily Beast, Rick Wilson. Joining the Lincoln Project on our virtual stage are our moderators for the evening, political and communications strategist Rosie Gonzalez-Spears and our very own Ambassador Alan Katz. For those of you familiar with American Public Square, you know we always provide a way for audience members to participate by asking questions. Using the Q&A feature in Zoom, please feel free to input a question for any or all of our panelists. American Public Square Community Engagement Director, Alana Mueller, will serve as our roving reporter this evening and will pose your questions to our esteemed panel. Again, be sure to download the digital program booklet from our event webpage at americanpublicsquare.org/event/TLP. Reed, Jennifer, Steve, Rick, Rosie, and Alan, welcome. Alan, I turn the floor back to you.
And first of all, also my co-moderator, Rosie Gonzalez-Spears, who I first met when she arrived with one of our little vignette givers tonight, Deval Patrick. And but in particular, I want to thank the 4 members of the Lincoln Project for giving us the time that you're giving us this evening. We know that you all are very busy. And I want to start the questioning with you, Reed. Why don't you just explain to everyone, give us sort of a short overview, what is the Lincoln Project, other than a group of people that seem to be having an awfully good time together?
Sometime in 2022, I'll get this figured out. Hi, everybody. I'm Reed Galen, one of the co-founders of the Lincoln Project. So last December, Jennifer, Rick, Steve, and I, and a number of other folks launched the Lincoln Project with the express mission of defeating President Trump at the ballot box next month, and as well as defeating those who have been his staunchest defenders, both in the U.S. Senate, a couple of members of the U.S. House. But I think it's more broadly, defined now as a really a pro-democracy effort, that what we're seeing is a true, as Steve would call it, a rescission of the democratic ethos of the United States, and that we are on the precipice now of making a decision in the next 3 weeks, which is, where do we want to go at its broadest level in this country? Do we want to go in a new direction with Joe Biden, or do we want to stay on a path in which the norms, the laws, and the traditions of this country from a democratic and a small L liberal perspective are in peril? We believe that country is far more important than party always, but certainly in these times. And so we have spent the last 9 months or so, 10 months or so now, working to defeat the president. We have utilized some tactics I'm sure many of you have seen. We have a broad-based level of support across this country. We have more than 4.5 million followers between our email lists and our social media following. Jennifer runs our Republicans and Independents for Biden operation, which has brought to bear some of the biggest names in Republican politics. Rick runs our creative department and making sure that all of the ads that you all see are as evocative and cutting as they can be. And then Steve is sort of our warrior monk. On any given day, he tells us exactly what it is the world looks like and how we should communicate to it. And so Alan and Rosie, just want to say thank you so much for having us tonight, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you all. I think that this topic of country over party is something that we often talk about, I think, on both sides of the aisle, but it is something that is easier said than done, as we have seen today in our politics. I want to pass it over to Jennifer. Can you tell us a little bit about how has this process been, stepping away from your party, and what has that been like, both in a professional and personal level?
Sure. Thank you, Rosie, for the question, and thank you to everybody for having us. I'm also honored to be part of this tonight. And I think that what we're doing at the Lincoln Project has become so much bigger and more important probably than what any of us even imagined when it first started. And the degree to which the American people have really embraced this idea of country over party has been very encouraging. And I think that that's where the strength and the effectiveness of what the Lincoln Project does is coming from. It's from the people that are supporting us, and kind of the heart that they bring to this issue. For me, I mean, I spent 4 years as chairman of the New Hampshire Republican State Party, first in the nation primary. It's kind of a big deal to be, in New Hampshire, in New Hampshire politics, to be with the party at that level and then to step away. It's a small state. But in doing so, I will say that I have found great freedom. It's very liberating to put yourself in a position where you no longer feel a responsibility to a political party, and you can truly speak completely openly about not just how you feel about issues, but how you feel about the party system itself, about the country, and the position we're in and where we need to go from here, which is something I think that the Lincoln Project has really done a terrific job of articulating over the past many months. As for what does it cost, I think anytime that you do what you know is the right thing, it comes with a cost, and we're constantly making choices in life about what is worth the cost and what isn't. In this particular case, how could it not be worth whatever the cost is? We are talking about Donald Trump, who I believe poses an existential threat to the republic. I believe that he is in the process of completely dismantling our American democracy, and that if allowed to go 4 more years, that he will do irreparable destruction to the world that my children and my grandchildren are going to live in and raise their families in. So there have been, I have lost friendships, I have lost professional relationships. As I said to a similar question earlier today, there are a few relationships that I thought were truly friendships, and I have since learned were simply political alliances, or there was a political benefit to being, associated. And now that that's gone, the relationship is gone, and that kind of thing is hurtful, of course. But it's nothing. It's penny candy compared to what we're trying to accomplish here. And I feel like what we are doing as a team right now is more important than anything I have ever done before in my life, other than raise my children.
Thank you, Jennifer. It certainly is tough as a political operative, I can imagine, to make that decision. But we thank you all for doing what you're doing. I think Alan might be. You're with us, Alan?
I have a question really for the group, and that is that you've raised an enormous amount of money. Has the money come in small amounts, or are there major funders that you have?
So we have almost 400,000 individual contributors. Our average contribution is about $50. And so we have had folks that have been kind enough to make 7-figure contributions, and we have folks who have given us $5. And we are grateful to each and every one of those folks. And I think, as Jennifer said, I think she said it so eloquently, if you had told us 10 months ago that we would be sitting here with so many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who have joined the banner and are marching forward in lockstep with us, I don't think we would have believed you. I could not be more humbled and flattered, not only for the financial support, but also for the moral and the political support, for all of the advice we've gotten, for all of the pats on the back for things that we have not yet accomplished, right? We've got 3 weeks to do these things. And so I think it's just truly been heartening to see how many folks just want, they want their democracy back. And if we can be a small part of that goal and that task, I say, sign us up.
I think so. One of the main things that we have all seen from Project Lincoln, what has really put you all on the map has been these incredible ads that just seem to go viral every single time. Rick, we know you're the brains behind these. I often look at these ads and think, is someone in Trump's head and just communicating it out via a 15-second ad? Can you tell us a little bit about the creative process? What have putting these ads out there been like, and kind of just like, how do you get all of these ideas?
Well, what Rick would say.
Well, it took a minute there. The beauty of living in Zoom world, as I call it. Well, Rosie, thank you for that question. And I will say this is a collaborative process. We have a great team. As Reed likes to say, every morning we talk and we generate all the worst ideas, and those are the ones that get made into ads. So, but kidding aside, we have lived rent-free in Trump's head now for so long that at some point I've got to make a trip to IKEA, because there's not much up there except the things we're putting in his brain every day. But as I said to one of the groups earlier, yes, we have a lot of flashy viral video ads that you see that are very much about the audience of one. And those are a big part of what we do. It's to keep Donald Trump disoriented, to keep him off base, to keep him off balance. But the process, we have some fantastic editors inside of our system who are able to convert the ideas that come from Jennifer and Reed and Stuart and Steve and our comm staff and people all around the process. And we get a lot of great ideas over the transom every day. So we're agnostic about where good ideas come from, but we always want to make them into ads that are compelling, that tell a great story, that are cutting into the core of Trump's self-confidence and his ability to believe in his campaign. We've helped make him paranoid about his campaign manager, about his campaign consultant, about his White House staff. We've managed to do all this not because it's fun to troll the president, it is, but it's not trolling when there's a hook in the fish's mouth. We know how to manipulate the president so that Joe Biden gets a free day. We know how to manipulate the president so that the campaign on Biden's side can do something affirmative every day. The joke of we go low so they don't have to is true. Now, but there are a lot of ads that we're doing that don't go viral, that aren't the big national news ads. Those ads are running out in the States, and they're convincing voters every day to move from Trump to Biden or to move from Trump into neutral. We'll take neutral all day. But we're litigating this case across a lot of different domains. We're very, very, very proud of our creative teams and our editing teams that put this stuff together. You know, it takes a lot of hard work that you don't see and never will to put these things out. And they're just delighted with the work that all of our edit teams get done every day.
Rosie, let me ask Steve one question. Steve, how does it feel to be in a Twitter war with the President of the United States? As I recall, he went after you Thursday night, I believe, Friday morning, and you then responded with the longest Twitter thread I've ever seen in my life. So I was just kind of curious what that felt like.
Thanks everybody for having all of us. It's not the first time for the two of us to have been engaged publicly. It is, remarkable. This is the President of the United States and one of the great crises in the history of the country, and this is how he's spending his time. And so I look forward to every opportunity that we get, whether it's through the ad process, whether it's through our coalition partners, to tell the truth about who Donald Trump is, the damage he's done, and to try to hold him to account. And I think, the reality is that a lot of the political press in the country is very nervous about repeating the mistakes from 2016 where they guessed wrong. And the reality is Joe Biden's got a large, durable, broad lead, one of the biggest in the modern era, and all the walls are collapsing in on Trump. Doesn't mean that there should be any let up, but I think that that's what he's focused on. Shows really the desperation of the campaign, and the fact that this organization has been effective at achieving its strategic aims. And we hope now to have a positive outcome as a result of that, as part of all of the groups aligned behind Joe Biden, trying to get rid of, who the person from our perspective is the worst and most dangerous president the country's ever had. And we hold him responsible for a very significant number of American deaths. If we had the same mortality rates in America that the Germans had, there'd be 155, 160,000 more of us alive today. He told this country the most lethal lie in history, and the opportunity to have a direct exchange with him and to say things to him that, for some reason, people are surprised that haven't been said before. I feel good about it, feel lucky about it. And I know all of us, feel privileged to be able to be in this fight at a moment when being in the fight matters.
Yeah. A follow-up question to Alan, Steve, is I also saw that tweet back and forth in which you said to President Trump, "You have never beat me. This is our first dance." How do you all feel about Election Day? Do you think that your first dance will be the last dance on November 3rd?
I've had the opportunity in my career to work at the highest level on two presidential campaigns, and we won one and we lost one. We're not in the campaign. We're not at the ship. We're not at the wheel of the aircraft carrier. We're out there in the fight, trying to make a difference, trying to do our part. We believe we've been effective. We believe we've put a frame on this race that's good for Biden and bad for Trump. We think we've been effective, and all the Senate races have contributed to the national conversation, have steered the debate. And we all believe right now that Trump's going down, that he's going to lose. But, we also, all of us, are proximate in age, who are involved in this. We all have, a bunch of us still have young kids. We worry about the country's future, right? So, the question is, a logical one and a psychological one, right? The psychological part of it, do I worry that Trump could be elected president of the United States again? Yeah, I do, because, it happened once already. And in the end, the truth is 4 years ago, I didn't think the country would do it. And it did. So, as we come down the stretch on this, I'm optimistic. I look at all the numbers. I see where things are. I look how Trump is comporting himself. So overall, I feel good about the state of the race. But at the same time, from my perspective, the consequences are so grave for the country, that it's hard to imagine, hard to contemplate. But I do, and we all do, and yeah, we worry about that.
I see that we've got a bunch of questions that have come from the people who are watching. Let me go to Alana. Do you want to ask the first question?
Sure. So I'd be delighted to. Everybody, welcome. I'm so happy to see everybody tonight. My name is Alana Mueller, and I'll be serving as your roving reporter tonight. There are many, many questions that have come in. What I'm trying to do is to curate them so that we can get as many questions in as possible from our audience. I'm going to combine a couple. So let me start with this. For our Lincoln Party, our Lincoln Project friends, there's a lot of conversation about Trump's base. We keep hearing about Trump's base and who he's catering to. So the question is, who is the Lincoln Project's base? And under the umbrella of country over party, do you see a time when the Lincoln Project becomes the Lincoln Party?
Well, let me take the party piece, and then I'll turn to Jennifer and Rick because they have a much better sense of the base than I ever did. Building a party is a really hard thing. As you all probably know, every state has its own rules for how political parties are founded and how they're governed. I will say that while we are fighting alongside our Democratic friends in this fight, we should be under no illusion that they have no more desire for additional competition on the ballot than Republicans do. I think that there is a lot of energy. I spent 3 years in the electoral reform space before we started the Lincoln Project. I think that we see an increasing number of unaffiliated and independent voters across the country. In a state like California, independents, or what we call declined to state out there, now outnumber Republicans. The same will probably be true in a state like New York before long. And so I think that there is an energy for new options and new choices on the ballot. I think that the idea of starting a new party is very flattering. And I think that, we should see where the energy takes us. I think that there is a lot of work that needs to be done at the foundational piece of this. Steve can talk to you about, the voting, new Voting Rights Act and a new Civil Rights Act, and some of the pieces that, there in Missouri were passed in 2018. I think a lot of those things are hugely important. I would say that, the Republican Party is probably gone to us. I don't think any of us are going back, nor have any desire to. But a new party, I think we'd like to just get Joe Biden into office first, and then we can decide about that. But I'll turn it over to Jennifer and Rick for the base of the president's support.
Well, if we're talking about who's the base of the Lincoln Party, I mean the Lincoln Project. See, Reed, you got me saying it now. Traditionally when we talk about the base, we're talking about party base, and those are the folks who are going to vote for the candidate based on the R or the D next to them, no matter what. And we see how damaging having governance that is led by the idea of party bases is, when it's, I'm somebody who believes that the party system is terribly broken and dysfunctional, and that it led to Donald Trump. If we're talking about the Lincoln Project and who is our base, I think of it more as a coalition than as a base, because a coalition from the Lincoln Project is historically expansive and inclusive. We have people from across the political spectrum in our country who have come to the Lincoln Project to kind of stand outside of the partisan boundaries in this one moment to achieve something extraordinary and incredibly important for, on behalf of the country. So our coalition is entirely about putting the concept of a party base aside altogether. Democrats, Republicans, independents, folks who haven't been involved before, folks who've been involved for decades, have all come together because they see the threat that Donald Trump and Trumpism, which I think is an important part of the conversation, poses to the country. I am so impressed and moved by the inclusive nature of the coalition that has come together under the efforts of the Lincoln Project. To Reed's point earlier about the people who have come to this effort to make it happen. We can talk about, I don't know if you're looking, and Rick can talk to this perhaps, as well, but digitally, who are the voters that we're targeting and who are our universes and our demographics and things. That's a different conversation. But in my mind, if you're talking about the Lincoln Project and, who is our base is a coalition of Americans who care deeply about the future of the republic, who want to preserve this democracy, this constitutional democracy for future generations, and are willing to set aside their partisan differences and their own political ambitions in order to step into this moment together and do the right thing for the nation and to truly put country over party.
Rick, do you want to talk at all about the demographics of who you're targeting in terms of the Lincoln Project?
Yes, I've got the training wheels on my mute button. It won't let me unmute by myself. Look, our targeting set has been something we've discussed rather extensively, publicly. We are looking to move the same kind of voters that moved in 2018 away from the Trump and the Republican Party. They tend to be more female. They tend to be more suburban. They tend to be more educated. We're looking to expand Biden's coalition in that dimension, and also in the dimension with independent-leaning men. Those areas have all been very valuable to us so far in terms of expanding the ability of Joe Biden to capture people for this election that he might not have otherwise been able to go after. So in terms of all those groups, we're going to continue to expand our envelope as we go forward. I mean, we've also started talking in the previous couple of weeks, especially in places like Florida, Arizona, and North Carolina, to military veterans and active duty military members. We found that to be an area where there was some movement possible for Joe Biden. We're also talking extensively now to seniors, especially in Florida, because the COVID pandemic has hit them very hard, and they've become an audience that was once solidly for Donald Trump. They are now much more receptive to the kind of message the Lincoln Party is putting out. So I think that probably is a short answer to a much more mathematically complex question that Mike Madrid, our political director, would be much more capable of answering than I am.
Yeah, we are not allowed to do math, we've been told.
No, we're all humanities guys here, not allowed to do any math.
I have to tell you, I was a math major, so I'll
you
work
have
on
an
that
advantage
for
over
you.
us.
Yeah.
I'll work on that for you. Before I turn it back to our moderators, I wanted to catch a couple of questions that are coming in specifically around the hearings that are going on right now related to the Supreme Court. And so several different questions, but I'll combine a few of them. The first question is, what is the Lincoln Project's perspective on the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett? And with that in mind, and maybe as an extension of that, should our country be concerned about the future of our democracy should she be confirmed?
Steve, why don't you take the underlying conceit of what McConnell and them are doing with the nomination?
A couple of thoughts about the Supreme Court. So I ran 2 Supreme Court confirmations. I ran the Roberts confirmation for Chief Justice and Samuel Alito's. And then in the Obama administration, I was asked to be publicly supportive of Sotomayor and Kagan, which I was. And so first off, the centrality of the courts, the stakes of the politics around this, the fact that the whole country loses their mind shows that the Supreme Court has taken on a new and dangerously unprecedented role in our politics, where the politicization is too much, too high. And I really think that one of the remedies to this is reform on the lifetime serving. Doesn't make sense. When people live to be 40 years old, and they were considered up there in the 1780s, it made sense. I'm not sure that it does now. No. A conservative justice is not a threat to American democracy, right? And most people don't understand the difference between judicial conservatism and political conservatism. And judicial conservatism, which is between the two views, the one that I'm more comfortable with, though not a hardliner on these questions, is that judges need to interpret the law as written. They're not a third branch of government that's out there to right the wrongs of society. That's not what a judge does in the American Republic. Now, this particular nomination, I don't think should proceed, and it shouldn't proceed for the reasons that are outlined in Federalist 10 that's written by James Madison. And it talks about the danger of faction, and faction in the way that the founders talked about it were political parties. And they were very worried about the danger of faction in a democracy, that there would be tribal entities that put the public good second to their tribal mentality, right, to their factional interests. And specifically in Federalist 10, what they talk about is an overzealous majority who is imposing and infringing on minority rights for the purposes of appeasing the faction in a way that's contrary to the public good. And so the public good here, because of the way that Garland is treated, is that this nomination goes forward quickly, haphazardly. People don't respect it, and it undermines the legitimacy of the court, further politicizing it. And that's why there were 88 members of the Notre Dame law faculty who said she should refuse the nomination. And I also think it further breaks the United States Senate that was once known as the world's greatest deliberative body. Wherever that is today, it's certainly not in the United States. So it just speaks now to the brokenness of the institutions. But, with regard to, the apocalyptic predictions of what it would be like for her on the court, I think at the end of the day, and Reed can jump in, for sure Brett Kavanaugh is gonna disappoint a lot of these right wingers, over time on these issues. I'd bet my arm on that. John Roberts will move to the left in a 6-3 court because he's an institutionalist. And she's going to be very careful. And Gorsuch is already surprised on a couple of these issues. So these are not Republican politicians. These are not senators. These are not, conservative Republican politicians. They're judicial conservatives, and it's a different deal. Now, I understand all of the angst around all of the issues, and particularly with women, and because of where the party is on a number of these issues. But no, you're not going to see a vote to overturn Roe v. Wade in the next couple of years that comes, out of this court because of a 6-3, filling of a vacancy. It's just that's not really how it works.
I would also say that to extend on what Steve said on the Federalist piece too is take it from the faction piece to what responsibilities these people have to not only their constituents but to the American people. There was a story this week, I think, or maybe late last week in Politico, that had a sitting member of the United States Senate, a Republican, who said we had to decide whether or not confirming Barrett or getting a relief deal was better for us politically, and we decided that confirming Barrett was a better path for us to get reelected. Like, they said it out loud. And there's enough jerks in that caucus that you could probably figure out who it is. Not that difficult to fashion. But I would say that's, while this is going on, the business of the Senate will be something other than the tens of millions of people who are unemployed, the tens of millions of people who saw their relief run out at the end of August, the tens of millions of people who are going to now start facing just, default and foreclosure and eviction. The tens of millions of school kids who are in and out, the tens of millions of parents who are trying to figure out how to, recreate their lives, the, tens of millions of grandparents like my parents who haven't seen their grandkids in a year. They decided all of that wasn't important so that they could win this one political victory that I believe will not ultimately save their electoral chances because they decided to be, narrow-minded, hollow shells of public servants. And so, they'll get what's coming to them in a few weeks. I think that, from our perspective, it was just one more reason why I think for us, and I can't speak for the others, this isn't a political party anymore. It's not the foundations of, philosophical foundations, ideological foundations are gone. It is an entity that revolves around one guy and whatever his whims are, of self-aggrandizement and self-enrichment. And that's not a political party.
In 2016, you probably had the most diverse group of Republican candidates running for president, certainly in my lifetime. What you have 15, 20 different people, senators, governors, former governors. And how did the party that all of you, which were part of, had helped, develop the way it developed, wind up with Donald Trump? And in other words, is he sort of the outgrowth of anything that happened before, or is he just such an anomaly that he kind of snuck past all the other Republican candidates to become the nominee?
Let me jump on this one first, Reed. What I would say, and have said many times about the 2016 cycle with 17 candidates, Republican candidates running for office, is I place directly the blame for us ending up with Donald Trump to some large degree in the hands of those 16 other candidates than Donald Trump. Somewhere around September, October of 2015, it was clear that Donald Trump was picking up steam, that he was, plowing ahead. And there was zero chance that about 13 of those 15 had any opportunity at all of moving forward regardless. And they should have had the character and the integrity and the generosity of spirit to simply step down and let the race become about Donald Trump and one or two or three other candidates, so that there was an opportunity there. Because we saw throughout as the elections began to unfold, he did not win by a majority of the vote in the first several states. It was, he had a plurality. He didn't have a majority. He wasn't winning by 55 or 65% of the vote anywhere. So I really put a tremendous amount of responsibility on those people in that race who had the opportunity to step aside and put country over party and country over personal ambition, and chose not to do that. As for how did we end up with him, I think that we have still not done a good enough job, and this needs to happen, of really learning and trying to understand those people who did vote for Donald Trump. We know that he empowered the worst among us to become public in what it is that is bad about them. Those who used to try to hide their racism, those who used to try to hide some of their ugliness, but they did not account for the majority of the people who voted for Donald Trump. And they don't account for the majority of Republicans who support him today. So I do think we have to take a people were clearly hurting. There were people out there who feel left out by the system, who feel ignored by the parties and by governance, and by who feel that they've been hurt and damaged over many decades. And we have not done a good enough job of understanding that yet. I hold in much greater judgment those people who vote for him again than I do for those who voted for him in 2016.
I would also say, just to echo something that Jennifer said about, the making the right choice as far as, stepping back so that they, that someone could, take Trump out in a primary. That's exactly what we saw so many very qualified and very talented Democratic candidates do earlier this year. Exactly. They realized, and I think this might go down in American political history as one of the greatest collective selfless acts, on behalf of democracy that we have seen, which is all of these candidates said, we got to make a choice. Biden is our opponent. Bernie's our opponent. Bernie's not going to beat Donald Trump. Remember, this is this is right as COVID was heating up too. So nobody knew what this was going to look like. And they all did that. And I think that, you remember, if you go back to summer or spring of 2019, who did Donald Trump try to kneecap? Joe Biden. Who did Donald Trump violate his oath of office to try and prevent from facing in a general election? Joe Biden. He was exactly the guy they never wanted to face because they knew he was their greatest threat to him. And so, you know, that's where we are now. And I would say that one of our partners in crime, a guy named Stuart Stevens, a longtime Republican ad maker, wrote a book this year called "It Was All a Lie." And, you know, there's a lot, you know, Stuart's from Mississippi, and there's a lot about, you know, Southern strategy and the constant and consistent racial undertones in Republican politics. But I thought one of the most fascinating things was that William F. Buckley, who's sort of the godfather of, you know, modern American conservative thought, you know, and we think about all the pulling up of the bootstraps and everything else, you know, would never have gotten his book published, but for the fact that his dad paid for it and then bought the publishing company. Like, that's not exactly what I call pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. And so when I think about it, there's, you know, a fairly disappointing level of, you know, mythology based not in fact, but in, you know, some ideology that, you know, maybe has always been too narrow for the greater good. But I think that we're certainly, I think we've reached the end state of that. And what comes next, I think, will be the work of many, many people in many, many years.
Yeah. So why don't we take a few minutes to talk about the Senate? Because in addition to your work at the top of the ticket, you're also working in some states, some critical races in the Senate. And I think what we are all experiencing is that it's not enough to just elect Joe Biden. We need to send a team with him up there to fix the crisis that we are in. Just curious if you could tell us a little bit about what Senate races are you working on? What Senate races are you most excited about? Dare I say it out loud? South Carolina. I know it's something I should not say out loud, but it is. It's too enticing. I'd love to hear
Rosie,
from you all what you think.
We all strongly share your enthusiasm for South Carolina. We believe that Lindsey Graham is a despicable, dishonorable person who has betrayed his friendships throughout his life. We believe he's a political parasite, and we have hammered him in ways that he never expected, both in terms of serious advertising and in terms of mockery that he has been unable to live down. We had a very talented young editor named Kate Salkowitz put together an ASPCA ad to go after Lindsey Graham that we were told later absolutely wrecked him because he is a man deserving of mockery. You go on TV and cry for donations, we're going to come after you. We are very excited about South Carolina. It's a tie ball game. Jamie Harrison is a fantastic candidate. That's one of the races we're very passionate about. We're also very passionate about Dr. Al in Alaska, who is every part of the Alaskan image. He's 6'8". He is a commercial fisherman. He is a orthopedic surgeon. He looks and feels and lives the part. And Dan Sullivan is basically like a bowl of tapioca. He's one of the most dull, procedural Washington guys. We're very excited about that race. We think Joni Ernst is in big trouble right now. We think Sue Collins is in big trouble right now. We helped put Martha McSally and Cory Gardner in a position where it's going to be very, very difficult for them to mount a comeback. And we're also now getting excited about Kansas, which, you know, was not on our radar screen 6 weeks ago and was not high on our radar screen 2 weeks ago, but there's real motion there. Republicans are in trouble across the country. They've got one seat that looks promising for them. That's Alabama with Doug Jones. And even that is not a certainty for them right now. So we're very active in the Senate space. We have made Mitch McConnell and his minions very, very unhappy in that regard. I'll let Reed pick up on that and talk further on that one.
Sure. And I think, you know, just to continue on Rick's remarks, this is not about the idea that, you know, we're after Republicans because we want to go punish Republicans. These folks have violated their oaths and their consciences in every bit of what it means to be a co-equal branch of government. They are not conservatives in the classic American sense. Every time they've had an opportunity to defend individual liberty, to defend or stand for fiscal conservatism or fiscal sanity, every time they have had a chance to stand up for a moral and muscular foreign policy for the United States, They have decided that they were more afraid of the nickname and the mean tweet than they were of doing their jobs. And so, you know, as Steve can give you his take on the COVID piece of this, but from our perspective, you know, they have never done anything. You know, they helped pass a tax cut in 2017 with no pay-fors. They stood silently by as the President of the United States deployed federal agents into the streets of the United States, nameless and faceless, you know, going looking for trouble, and they found it, not surprisingly. And he has, you know, decided to cuddle up and play footsie with Vladimir Putin and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and Erdogan and all of the rest of them. Those are fundamentally non-Republican stances. They're frankly un-American stances in many ways. And so I think that, you know, these folks, you know, they're all complicit. They deserve a T behind their names. They're no longer Republicans. They are whatever they have allowed themselves to be turned into. One of their consultants said that we were treating these people like hostages, as if a United States senator has no agency. I mean, it's an absolutely ridiculous thing. Right. And, you know, the more of them that we can send into retirement or more likely to K Street, the better.
Aren't you sick, Reed? What has surprised me most about this is how much whining has come out of these guys.
They're so whiny.
I expected more of a fight. What a bunch of whiners.
They have no fight. They have no fight. I mean, like whatever ounce of soul they had left, they left on the Senate floor for Trump. But hey, Steve, can you give just your 2 minutes on what it meant for them to fail vis-a-vis COVID?
I just was going to say I was trying to jump in on the other question about the you know, whose fault it is in the Republican Party, and I think, you know, this goes to the heart of why there's a Lincoln Project. You know, in large part, you know, as Jennifer said, you know, certainly it was the candidates on the stage who were all afraid to confront Donald Trump, right? They didn't want to get into the murder-suicide piece. So Rand Paul, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, they all thought the same thing about Donald Trump. They were just waiting for one of the others to say it first because they believed that in doing so, right, that they would survive the encounter and keep going on. And so Trumpism was allowed to grow. And there was this fantasy, right? And I remember being on Morning Joe and on TV all the time, and people would just go on and say, well, his ceiling's 10%. I remember sitting there, Reed and I would talk about this all the time. I'd be like, why do they say that, right? And it's at 20%, 30%, 40%. And so when we were watching the Democratic debates in the fall, you know, Rick and I become great friends, and, you know, and all of us, but, you know, I didn't know Jennifer. I didn't know Rick. I knew John Weaver and Reed really well. John knew Rick, and, you know, we all kind of came together, but it was all, there's a name at the debate, you know, that we didn't hear, right? It's like Trump's like Voldemort, right? Like, why won't anybody say the guy's name out loud, right? This entire election, you know, is about Trump, Trump, and Trump. And I think on the senators, the issue comes to this. The one thing that our founders never anticipated was the willful subordination of a co-equal branch of government, the legislative branch, through the form of the Senate, you know, subordinating themselves to the executive branch. You know, the checks and balances are vital in this country. And in the end, you know, I suppose that what the Senate Republicans' proposition is that every one of these people knew Trump was lying about how lethal the virus was. They all knew. They all knew how lethal it was. And they knew that he knew how lethal it was. And they didn't do anything. They didn't go to the floor of the Senate and give a speech and say, stop this insanity. They didn't go to the Oval Office and bang on the table and say, stop this, you're killing people with this. Not one of them. And now they're running for re-election under the premise of, hey, give me 6 more years, I'll be an independent voice who fights for you and has your families back. Are you kidding me? I mean, across the board, but there's no issue that supersedes that issue. And the crisis in American politics is fundamentally a result of the fact that, you know, we could look at 4 or 5 of the biggest issues. This is why a group like this is so important. We got 85 to 90% of the country that agrees on what we should do, basically, about immigration or about guns. but we can't get it through the political process. And part of the reason we can't get it through the political process is because the type of cowards that we send up into these jobs. You know, I think a prerequisite for it should be, right? You want to talk about doing better debates, right? Here's a question for a future debate. What issues are you willing to lay your political career down for? What issue are you willing to vote for and accept the consequences? I mean, the fact of the matter is there should be 5 or 6 gleeful senators, Republican senators who go out there or fatalistic and say, listen, I know you all hate Trump, right? I'm not someone who's going to be against something that Trump is for just because it's Trump, but I was against him on all these things. I fought against all this stuff as hard as I can, and have some fatalism about the choice. And by the way, there's no homeless former U.S. senators. They all do well. Like, they'll be fine.
Right.
All of them. Right?
They'll go to K Street.
Right? They don't even have to be lobbyists. They could do other stuff too. Right? Cory Gardner could be a fishing guide. You'd have a happy life. Right? But the point is, right, there's lots of opportunity in America, and the cowardice that we've seen is just something we really have to reckon with, how broken the system is. And you know, nobody should. Trump is a symptom. A healthy system doesn't produce President Trump, right? And what I would say to the Democrats on the call, and I say this respectfully, what does it say about the Democratic Party that you have 43% of the country as a floor who looks at Trump and says, yeah, I'm picking him over that? That's an incredible number. Why is that? Right? Circumspection and reflection, both as individuals and institutions, you know, are worthwhile exercises most of the time. And, you know, I hope what Democrats will have is total control of the federal government. And then I hope and pray that they will show for the first time in many, 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 many years in this country, from a governance perspective, the wisdom of restraint. Because we need someone to show restraint as we seek to get basic functionality back to government, fundamental reforms to government passed, and start to come out of this COVID crisis, which will take up the entirety of Joe Biden's first term.
Rosie, let's see whether Alana has more questions for us, okay?
Yeah.
I do, of course. There are many, and I apologize, folks. I'm not going to be able to get to too many of your questions. Maybe we can share them with the Lincoln Project and get some of them answered offline. I want to continue on the same line of discussion. We've had several comments or questions come in that there's some surprise that it sounds like the Lincoln Project is sort of voting or supporting a straight Democratic ticket. One question or one comment says, does the Biden-Harris team understand that Republicans who are supporting him are supporting country over party and not so much the Democratic Party's agenda? And there are other questions in that same spirit that ask, again, sort of going back to the Lincoln Project's specific politics, where do you all find yourselves falling these days? I know we talked earlier that, you know, there may not be a way back for any of you back to the Republican Party, but how do you see yourselves going forward? And can you address that question about the Senate seats, and if it's just a straight Democratic ticket, or if you're choosing specific individuals or candidates over others?
Well, let me say this about.
Yeah, go for it, Rick. Go.
Let me say this about the question of country over party. I think the Biden campaign is building the largest coalition in political history. And I think that they are cognizant of the fact that not everybody is there. Not everybody is supporting Joe Biden because they are, you know, progressive woke voters. They realize that Joe Biden has a job ahead for the next 2 years, and that job is rebuilding the country after COVID and the economic crash that COVID is causing. And so they recognize that there's a practicality to the decisions of many voters. I am at the moment a registered non-party affiliated. I'm an independent in Florida. I've unregistered from the GOP after the primary. I wanted to vote against the son of a bitch twice, so I stayed as a Republican until that moment. But you know, this is not about. We are not a policy organization. You know, if there's a policy thing that we're about, it would be in the space of how do we improve and protect our democracy. So we could see a Voting Rights Act, a Civil Rights Act, an Election Security Act, a Civil Service Reform Act, things that make our government more resilient and make and restore public confidence in the government and in a future administration. But we're not an ideological organization. We are a special forces team here to try to take out Donald Trump, politically speaking.
So my question to you all is, when this is over with, let's assume that you're successful in defeating Donald Trump. The Democrats, as Steve just laid out, now control the entire government. Do you see yourself standing as a group that's going to hold people to their promises? Are you going to be a potential threat to people that sort of waver in terms of their notions of party over country as opposed to country over party? Or do you think you'll just kind of drift along having a good time like you're having now?
I'd like to think that we'd be more coalition partners to a President Biden as he attempts to heal the country. You know, I know that we have a reputation, and rightfully so, of being very hard hitting and direct. Remember who we're up against. You know, you apply the strategy and tactic to the fight you're in. I would venture to say that if Trump is the biggest vampire, then there's a whole bunch of little vampires that we might apply those same methods to. But I would say that more generally speaking, it would be dependent upon, you know, what it is the objective is and what the task is at hand. You know, are we, you know, going to hold people to account? I would say that we would like to be, you know, in our own way, you know, maybe a leavening force on things, which is if we know that there is going to need to be a broad, bipartisan piece of legislation or agenda to get the country back in place, that we would be able to help Democrats where they need to make their arguments, and also remind Republicans that they have a responsibility to the country and their constituents before they have a responsibility to their party. And so I think that, you know, I don't think we're just going to float along. I think we will continue to enjoy ourselves. But I think there's a heck of a lot of work ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm surrounded by large dogs who are frequently barking. So Reed and Rick are all familiar with them. So yes. So they've been on mute. Look, our goal is not to be America's public scolds on errant politicians. Right. That's the voters' jobs in their states. We very much have a point of view about Trump's degradations to the culture, his disgracefulness, his desecration of his office, the lawlessness, the assaults on institutions. I think all of us are institutionalists at our core, which is a important aspect of small c conservatism. We are also small l liberals. We are classical liberals. We believe in liberal democracy. We believe in the American republic, in the American system, and Trump is a real threat to it, and could go, you know, through that piece of this for hours and hours and hours. All around the world, we see democracy in retreat. You know, we hit the high water mark sometime in the 90s. There are German far-right parties that are marching with a new Führer on their banners. Anyone want to guess where he is from? He's from Queens. We all over the world, we want to be in the fight for democratic values. And in the end, in this country, you know, I'm from New Jersey. I come from a very moderate Republican tradition. A lot of people will say, for example, I'm a conservative before I'm a Republican. I was never a conservative. I was a Republican in a Republican Party where you felt completely at home as a moderate member in a coalition. Truth is, you know, back in the day when I started out, I probably would have been right in the, to the right of the Democratic Party, but have always been a centrist. And we have an era coming up that's going to require some pragmatism. I don't know what it means to be the limited government party when the country's $30 trillion in debt. You're certainly not the fiscally responsible party when you have spending equaling $3 trillion in the month of March. I can't even wrap my head around it. And so what does policy look like as we seek to rebuild America? Everything needs to be talked about. And I think it's longer discussion than we have tonight, but Trump is a very consequential president. He has ended the American era. And the American era ran from Franklin Roosevelt through Barack Obama. Roosevelt talked to the Canadian Prime Minister, Mackenzie King, about it as he was talking about his vision for the post-war world. And he said to Mackenzie King in the White House, he said he had no aspiration that the world he was envisioning would last forever, just that it would last for as long as every person who was alive on the day the war was won was still alive. And we're about there. But make no mistakes, the American era has ended. Doesn't mean we're not a big, rich, powerful country. Doesn't mean we're not the biggest economy in the world. But the trajectory that the American ship of state that was steered in through the tacks and the turns and the zigs and the zags and the differences was on a relative straight line, a relative straight course. And we've departed from that course. And so what comes next, what comes after this is going to be different. And it's going to define the rest of our lives. And we have real work to do in this country on a number of issues. And I mean, I'll just throw out one very quickly. You want to understand how it is that Donald Trump paid $750 in taxes? Well, maybe Republicans who've been calling for tax reform, even a Steve Forbes, who was laughed at for a simplistic approach, let's just, check out a box on a postcard and mail it in. But the fewer pages the tax code is, the less corruption there is, right? Tax reform is something we should do in this country. Doesn't have to be a liberal or conservative thing. I think we could get into a room with Democratic counterparts and solve the immigration issue in a principles manner in an hour. Everyone knows what you need to do there. Same with guns, same with a dozen other issues. And that's what American politics has to move in that direction. We want to try to push it there, right? We want to be a force for common sense, for common good. And I'll just say lastly, none of us feel bad about the tone of our ads, right? At all. Like we feel really good about it. That being said, we don't want that to be the tone. I hope that's not the tone 8 years from now. I hope we don't ever have to say anything like that ever again about someone who's occupying the office of President of the United States. And the best way to do that is to take out all of the remnants of this as early as possible for the next cycle, from Tom Cotton to Ted Cruz to Marco Rubio, to disqualify them as legitimate presidential candidates who could win. But we got a lot of work to do in this country.
And let me just finish Steve's thought before we move on. There's a woman named Ann Applebaum who's been hugely helpful to us. She's brilliant. She's a staff writer for The Atlantic. She just released a book earlier this year called The Twilight of Democracy. I highly commend it to you. It's 160, 180 pages. And one of the things she says in there is that one of the biggest things we've lost in this country is a common discussion. We don't talk about the same things. If you looked at what Joe Biden was trying to say on the debate stage a couple of weeks ago and what Donald Trump was saying, it was like watching, and I'm oversimplifying, so forgive me, what local news was talking about in Columbus, Ohio, and what Fox News was talking about. That there's no common way of talking about, as Steve said, these issues that are 80% issues. If we go back 40 years, if it was ABC, CBS, NBC, whatever the nightly news was, generally speaking, there was the same conversation. The same things were being discussed. As Steve said, when we worked on the 2004 Bush campaign, the war on terror aside, as Steve likes to say, the biggest issue in the campaign was whether or not it was a tax rate of 38.6% or 35%. But the campaigns were talking about the same things. And so I think we have to get back to there. I think we have to drive a discussion. We have to drive a narrative in this country of solving the problems we have and anticipating the ones we don't. And we don't do that anymore. And I think, that's why when political systems start to break down, populists and demagogues rise to the fore, because people say, none of this works for me. It leaves me behind. I'm getting screwed. This guy says he'll fix it. What the hell? I'll give it a shot.
Last question. Alana, you have it?
I can, certainly. I'm going to pose this to Jennifer. It's a little bit of a different spin. But since you've held political office and have run for office, I think that it's a good one for you. But the question is this: given the current political climate, what encouragement would you give to someone who's considering a run for public office? And the other question is, do any of you plan to run for public office following this?
I can't imagine ever running for office again. I'll tell you that. For 100 different reasons, not the least of which is I have learned that I can be much more effective outside of that system. I ran for office because I thought I could be effective in changing the world and that sort of thing. And while I truly can very passionately embrace the idea that one voice can make a difference, I think I can be more effective where I am. And as far as encouragement, I would strongly encourage anybody who has a heart for service, a heart for democracy, a heart for America, and thinks that they want to run for office, I would strongly encourage them to do so. But what I think we really need in Washington is a fairly broad rejection of the party authority over those people who get elected. The problem is when you get to Washington, you're immediately confronted with the choice of either being all in with your party, so that Mitch McConnell, for example, will make sure that some of his fundraising goes to your reelection, so that you become part of this power and financial relationship that is completely separated from the purpose of service, your purpose for being there. And so I think the most important thing is that whoever we send, whoever's thinking about going, they have to be ready to make those character choices, those moral choices that separate you from the club, that will separate you from the group that's going to theoretically support you and protect you from all comers. Well, what we've seen in the last 4 years is that Mitch McConnell couldn't protect these guys from the devastation that Donald Trump has brought to the party. And worse than that, we have seen that having gone all in for the system the way it exists now in such a broken state, nearly every one of these Republican senators have now abandoned their character. They've abandoned their integrity. They have put themselves in a moral position that they are never going to be able to make right again. So I hope that those are the kinds of issues, and that's the perspective that people will think about if they're ever really thinking about running for office again. And let me just finish quickly, Alana, because I know I won't get a chance to speak again. I think it's hysterical that you don't trust any of us with our own mute button.
Well, she knows us.
It wasn't my choice. It wasn't my choice.
I would just say, additionally to that, Jim Inhofe, who's the senator from Oklahoma, is running for re-election. He's 86 years old. Dianne Feinstein is over 90 years old. And I mean this with all seriousness, because we have to figure out as a country how to get the best of us, right, to run for office. And I'll give you a progressive idea that I think is part of the solution to the mix. There has to be some type of public funding of campaigns. TV stations, these are public airwaves that they have licensing for. maybe it's there. I think that we have to look at campaign finance reform through a pretty free market position. For 40 years, we've moved money around in a balloon that's only gotten bigger. We've taken all the money away from the parties and put it into outside groups. And I think it's had a terrible effect. But I would say this to anyone, any person who's running for a fourth term in the United States Senate is going from 18 years in a day to 24 years, right? I just wish it would be the attitude of every person in every state, right? That, like, if we're going to give someone a fourth term, right, that person's going to look a lot like a John McCain, like a Patrick Moynihan, like a Ted Kennedy, whatever your but that they're going to be a giant figure in the fabric of this country. But as a general proposition, for all of these people, 18 years is more than enough, right? And for most of them, like 12 will do. But the idea that we have so many people in their 80s, in their 90s, in fourth and fifth terms is part of the sclerosis. If you think that an 86-year-old guy from Oklahoma is in touch with the challenges facing this country, right, in the third decade of the 21st century, I mean, I have a bridge to sell you. The Trump.
Can I tell you, just to echo that? I told somebody this earlier today. Chuck Grassley is 87 years old. He was born in the first year of FDR's first term. He is older than the New Deal. Do you really think he represents the country?
I hope, seriously, I hope he's got another 20 years in him, but it's time to hang it up. But I do think
just not in Congress.
Yeah, I do think there's nothing wrong with running explicitly ageist campaigns, right, against some of these guys in the year ahead. I wish we had one of them in the sights this cycle to test out the hypothesis, but unfortunately we don't. We will in the next one, but it's not good for the country.
I've always said that service in Congress should not be a career. And I ran on that when I ran for Congress. It's probably why I lost. It should not be a career.
And anybody who wants it to be a career is nuts.
Right. and as such should not be trusted with leadership.
Yes.
Well, with that, I want to thank you all. I know we have some parting remarks from Ambassador Katz, but I want to thank you all for being part of this. It's been really a wonderful evening. I am grateful for your candor and for answering all of our questions. Rosie and Alan, thank you for moderating. And I'm going to send it back to Ambassador Katz for some closing remarks.
It's a tradition at American Public Square that we present each of our guest moderators and panelists with an official American Public Square civility bell. We hope you will keep it in your home or your office as a reminder of the importance of fostering civil dialogue. We hope you will also feel free to ring it when your partners, your spouses, your children, your friends, or those with whom you disagree get out of line. We will be mailing those to you in the next week or so. Be looking for them. Now, as I have taken to doing each year in closing out tonight's panel, I would like to leave you with some words from Bill Bishop and Robert Cushing from their book, The Big Sort. In a country that is dividing by economic prospects, by years of education, by the look and feel of what constitutes a family, and by political persuasion, we continue to believe there might be a more important message we all need to hear. The message people living in a democracy must understand more than any other message is that there are Americans who aren't just like you. They don't live like you, they don't have families like yours, and they don't think like you. They may not live in your neighborhood, but this is their country too. And with that, I turn it back over to Claire to close out this evening's program.
Thank you, Alan. And thank you, Rosie, Reed, Jennifer, Steve, and Rick. What a terrific discussion that covered an awful lot of ground. Everyone, thank you for joining us tonight. I want to once again acknowledge the generosity of our platinum sponsors, Jean and Tom McDonnell and the Macintosh Foundation, along with our gold, silver, and bronze level sponsors. Thank you. Tonight would not have been possible without your support. Following my remarks, we will once again hear from the talented artists from William Jewell College with a performance by the William Jewell Concert Choir, so please stick around for that. Coming up at APS, we have several exciting events. In fact, 1 week from tonight, on October 20th, we will host a virtual Cocktails and Politics event with Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio. On October 22nd, in partnership with the Kansas City Star, we will host a daytime panel entitled Gun Violence in Missouri, Seeking Solutions. And on October 27th, we will host another Cocktails and Politics event focused on the Electoral College. Please visit us at americanpublicsquare.org to learn more and register for any or all of these great programs. Thank you for coming. Join me in enjoying the William Jewell Concert Choir to close out tonight's program. Good night.
Cities